have told me that I would be farming 10 years ago, I probably would have thought you were crazy. Because I just knew I was going to be a medical doctor. Like, I knew that was my path. That was the route that I was going. But science really did help to widen the lens of what is possible. After undergrad at Chicago State, I was the student program coordinator, so I oversaw all of the student research for the science departments. So I connected students to different principal investigators, and this one particular student did research on trichomes of plants that were grown near expressways to see whether or not the air quality affected the immune response of the plant. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so freaking cool. Like, what is this thing called urban agriculture? Like, what is it? And that's when that theme got introduced to me. Herban Produce is about 23 continuous city lots, which is up to 2 acres in size. Started off as a nonprofit, and the goal was to create, local produce and distribute it to restaurants. Fast forward to 2020. Of course, we all know what happened in 2020. All of my clients, they, canceled their orders, and so I had to rethink about what the business model would look like. I just went through this whole thing in my head, like, this community doesn't need another nonprofit. I needed to provide and stimulate the economy. And how can I do that? By providing jobs. A lot of the farmers that farm downstate, they're not nonprofits, right? Like, these are legit businesses. They're generations, like they've been in business from generation to generation. And so I was like, okay, how can I create something that could be passed down, right, to the next generation? Wouldn't it be remarkable if our great-grandkids came to the West Side and Herban Produce was still in existence and even grew more?
I am fourth generation, so half mile from where mom and dad live is actually grandpa grew up. His mom actually had a truck farm patch that she sold vegetables and stuff, direct to local here in Taylorville. That's kind of how she helped keep the kids fed. And dad farmed with my uncle, so kind of there through the mid-90s, lost some ground and stuff, so required the operation to downsize. We've got 15 Red Angus cows, so we sell the majority of our calves. We finish them out as freezer beef. And then also working with my sister and my parents, have some chickens that we sell, eggs, have some goats, and just some other livestock as well. So then we do custom baling most of the summer, so spend quite a bit of time in the hay fields. Every day is a new adventure, and every day is a new opportunity. Welcome to the Funny Farm. So, and that's, kind of like the hay. The hay was kind of a niche market. There's not a lot of people here. Christian County's corn and soybean country. I think it's easy for us to kind of get our tunnel vision. I know what's in my backyard. I know what my neighbors are doing. And, the majority of us are corn and soybean producers. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that traditional ag production. That is part of what's made the industry it is. But as we look on how we're going to evolve and continue to be relevant in the future, we've got to figure out how to embrace all these other producers as well.
Illinois Farm Bureau is a grassroots organization that advocates and provides technical assistance to farmers across the state. As a grassroots organization for Illinois Farm Bureau, that means that every single county, all 102, are represented. We have 96 county offices throughout the state. Those drive all policy at the state level for Illinois Farm Bureau. Farms like Matt Heberling's is an interesting opportunity. As a younger farm president, he's bringing a diverse perspective, as well as being from central Illinois. He's in a rural community, but he's a suburb to an urban community, creating a perspective that oftentimes hasn't been seen before. His farm is a smaller production farm as well. He's able to showcase a very interesting part of agriculture and understand different types of community and represent it as a leader in the organization.
I'm finishing year 5 as president, so within that role, I think it's allowed me to bring a unique perspective because I'm able to kind of bring that fresh perspective, kind of a diverse background, and I guess able to see a little bit of the big picture, full picture of Illinois ag.
I think that what's unique about a farming business in the city of Chicago or in an urban setting in general is that you realize how important it is to support hyper-local businesses, right? To keep dollars within the community.
COVID, the pandemic kind of made us realize some of the supply chain issues and how maybe we need to get back to our roots and kind of rely on some stuff in our backyard and our neighborhoods. So, kind of looking here locally, our farmers market in Taylorville has probably almost doubled in participants and just, the vendors that are there as well as consumers coming to look for produce every week. So keep your dollars local. When you're shopping local, you're supporting local, that dollar is actually staying within your community. If you go shop at the chain, I really think, the chains and everything is part of the reason that we're seeing part of these rural communities struggle so much right now is because these chains got so big, they lost touch of their local consumer. You lose a grocery store, next thing you know, families start moving, and ultimately just leads to the demise of our rural communities.
We should not think of a grocery store being a luxury, right? It should be something that we could easily get to, and we should have accessibility to fresh and culturally relevant foods, right?
Food insecurity is, as a broader term, just not knowing where your next meal is going to come from, not having access to food, a traditional, 3 meals a day perspective. I've seen it firsthand myself. I left home when I was 16, and my primary job was not sufficient enough to cover the bills, and so I've eaten many a ketchup sandwich in my day. And I ended up having to get 2 additional jobs because I knew they had staff meals. So not knowing where your next meal is coming from is a very daunting aspect.
And I think food insecurity goes even a step further than that. And so, because this is something that I've been working on with the farm. Let's say I hand a busy family who has 3 children, they're working maybe, 80 hours a week, and I say, hey, here's a fresh box of produce. What the hell are they gonna do with that, right? They barely have enough time to probably get home, make a quick dinner, and put their kids down for the night, right? And so it's even thinking about, okay, how can I make it even easier for this family to consume fresh produce and healthy foods, right?
Nutrient density helps you avoid, eating too many calories, because they're just empty calories, right? And we've got to try and avoid that, which will help from a diabetes standpoint, an obesity standpoint, which obviously all of that reduces medical costs, which, is a benefit to the community long term, right?
It's odd to think of a food desert in an urban community just because they've got the resource, or you would think they'd have the resources. But one thing that we take for granted here downstate is we've got a vehicle. But when you look at some of our urban counterparts, they don't have that vehicle, or they just don't have, for us to drive 15 miles is like asking them to drive a mile. It's not comparative, apples and oranges. But if I lived another 3 miles south, I'd be a lot more, I'd be looking at a 30-mile round trip for groceries.
Even Secretary Vilsack mentioned that after the pandemic, we need to regionalize our food systems. And that's an important step in overcoming food security, food deserts.
It's really funny when we started working in food systems development over a decade ago. You could not have a conversation where economic development, food access, and local foods were having a conversation. It was believed that they had nothing to do with each other and they couldn't relate. Today, that is the only conversation we're having, because what we are finding is food drives economic development in both rural and urban communities, in particular, areas that are struggling. This could be abandoned space, this could be sites that are no longer viable for production, and what we see is a food program, be it an urban farm, a brewery, or a grocery store come into that community, and it changes the community. Northern Illinois University is incredibly unique that they are not what you typically think is an agriculture school. However, they have invested in food systems development. So they've created one of the most unique programs I've heard of, which is an Edible Campus.
The Edible Campus, the idea with the Edible Campus was to kind of err away from traditional landscaping to more edible landscaping and incorporate more specialty crops in what we see around campus.
But they're also creating community gardens that are feeding their food pantry programs. They're launching hydroponic farms, and all of a sudden we have ag education while food access is happening at a school that's not an agriculture program.
You know, we managed to partner with Feeding Illinois and Illinois Farm Bureau. They donated some raised beds for us, and we have around 100 raised beds that we have out in campus where, you know, it's free for students in the community to pick what's ever ready and available. And we are going to continue to add more raised beds every year. You can put them into the ground. This creates stability here, or if you put it this way, you can use this to stack. We built the market garden that you can see behind me, which is currently at about 1/3 of an acre. And so we partner with a local hardware store to get tools in order to grow in a traditional 30-inch no-dig, no-till bed method. I mean, we've been doing this since February, and the interest that it has created in our student body has been unbelievable. All of these components are just opening the eyes of the students to make them realize, you know, food systems is a very relevant role. And they can, you know, as I said, regionalizing your food systems, they can get into this and grow for their community, help solve food security issues, and generate a livable wage.
The students that come through the internships through the farm, they now see the importance of having natural landscapes and having beautiful spaces around them. And I think, to me, that is the gateway to getting them connected to agriculture and being concerned about their neighborhood. Where my farm is located, the land had been vacant since the MLK riots, and it's kind of remarkable. So there are certain features or places in this immediate area. If you look at historical pictures, they look exactly the same. The other day, I almost wanted to cry because I saw a young man walking his dog with his daughter, and she was stopping on the prairie and she was foraging flowers. Like, that was so precious to me. Like, here it is, this baby girl is foraging flowers, and that probably is so small. She had like a little bouquet. And it connected to me because my daughter does the same thing. As we go on our walks, she forages flowers. So yeah, I think that drastically improves and widens one's worldview, right, of what is possible because of these small improvements to, you know, the environments around them. I find the younger, the better, or the more they advocate for it.
There was a countrywide survey done that indicated that on average, around 46% of college students suffer from food security issues at some point during their degree. Now, from a university standpoint, if you think about what that, what that can lead to, diminished grades, retention issues, graduation rates dropping, right? So food security is very important for students on campus. So from the NIU perspective, this is a very important topic that we're trying to help bring awareness to and stem as much as we can. And that's why the Edible Campus project came about.
Illinois Farm Bureau runs a program called Adopt-A-Legislator. Adopt-A-Legislator connects our urban legislators with our rural communities. Similar to many other opportunities, we want our urban legislators to see what's happening on rural farms. Those Adopt-A-Legislators are then able to create connections with county farm bureau presidents in counties like Christian County with Matt Heberling.
Representative Harper's been our Adopt-A-Legislator, so Representative Harper had come down with her daughter. She got to pet the horses. She held baby chicks. And just, kind of that interaction, that conversation, I think she really connected. And then I can think of multiple times through the years that, we've met her in Springfield and had dinner. We've met her in Chicago during an annual meeting.
And through that, they begin to have conversations that are very open. But those rural communities are going up into urban communities, and they're going onto farms like Alicia's.
We went up to her district and, toured some of the greenhouses and, some of the stuff that they've done to help revitalize some of her urban areas. And it just makes you realize that we are all connected in the state.
That is something that those urban legislators understand, but maybe don't think about. But through that, we connect about all sorts of agricultural policy.
Honestly, ag is a passion. So, it's what I go to bed at night, thinking about is just, what can I do in the ag industry to make an impact? I know what my neighbors feel about urban producers. Urban producers know what their neighbors feel about downstate ag. At the end of the day, if we can share conversations, we can actually help break some myths too. We aren't just spraying chemicals for the fun of it, or, the urban ag can tell the story that, we're more than just a garden. We've got to worry about, the market stability, finding a place to go with our produce. So, there's a lot of misconceptions that both sides can help, fix. And that's been a great value of the Taste of Illinois project too, is it actually puts us in the room together to have some of these discussions.
Taste of Illinois, like many of our Farm to Fork tours, is an opportunity to create conversation from farmers across not just Illinois, but other states and other countries. Farms like Alicia's is a great place to put that conversation to action. She's able to talk about the barriers she faces, and she's able to hear from other farmers on what they're doing.
They were like, "Oh, girl, you're really out here farming." And they realized that I had a skill set that they didn't have, and I realized that they have a skill set that I don't have. But it was just funny, they're like, "Oh, wow, you're really producing a lot."
But as we talked with, on the Taste of Illinois, on location through those tours, you realize that the stuff we take for granted, they actually have to advocate and fight Chicago City Council for, state legislator for. So I remember one of the big things that really struck me was I remember talking with Alicia. They could not actually keep the rainwater to irrigate their plants with. So, that's something that, as we think, down here, downstate, if you've got a garden, look around a lot of these farms says they've got rain barrels. To think that I could not save rainwater for future use just seems completely absurd to me.
My water bills were upward to almost $15,000 for the season. And I just had to think about, okay, how are we gonna keep this going? So then we applied for a hydrant permit to use hydrant water. We got denied for that. So then that created another barrier and challenge to overcome. And so, of course, we switched up our irrigation system so that we use less water. But every farmer may not be able to pivot in that way.
Day in and day out farming is an unexpected surprise that is never easy, and you never know what challenge is going to come up. It's back-breaking in so many different ways, from hand-picking apples and cutting lettuce so that it doesn't get contaminated in the wrong capacity, to broken machines and hay bale wires going in all directions, or your pipe freezing in your hydroponic farm. These farms have faced those things.
We all share one common value, and that's the work ethic. So, they're in the field, they're working with the hose, they're working with their hands, they're actually putting in the blood, sweat, and tears, to make a successful crop, much like our downstate producers are. We're putting in the long hours to ensure that, the food supply is here for the country and the state.
The thing that I admire the most, I think, is our ability to troubleshoot. It's almost like this I can't quit kind of attitude. And I think farmers, the way that we pivot is kind of remarkable.
As you sit in our young leader committees and as you sit and just kind of talk with some of the younger farmers, you kind of hear a lot of the conversations around how we've kind of lost the vision of the total profitability of the acre, but it's more of a numbers game that you just need more acres. It's not how can I get more revenue from this acre, it's I just need to pick up more ground. And I do think, kind of hit on it earlier, but I think the pandemic kind of maybe made us hit a little bit of a reset button, because it's made a lot of our rural communities, the urban communities have seen it too, a little more food insecure, and kind of take a step back and be like, I feel a lot more comfortable with my future when I know where my food's coming from, when I know who my producer is. So I think that's something, I think we're all seeing that need to come back to the community and I guess kind of rebuild where we came from.
Urban agriculture is a great way to reconnect. Alicia is one of those opportunities that you see that happening, where her family had historical context to this, and she found a way to twist agriculture to fit her needs and her community while still getting back to her roots.
My maternal great-grandfather was a sharecropper in Mississippi. He started off with a small vegetable farm, and it grew to over 100 acres. None of his children wanted to actually participate. One, farming is hard work. Two, most of them were illiterate, right? And they were unable to really be savvy businessmen. And so they just kind of scraped by and got, what they could. Because of that, my grandmother's generation and of course my parents' generation disconnected from farming altogether. And then my paternal great-grandfather, he was of course part of the Great Migration. Part of his business was actually getting a refrigerated truck and delivering fresh vegetables to the Altgeld Gardens, which is on the south side of Chicago. And those residents called him the Vegetable Man. So these stories actually came out after I started farming myself, right? Because my family was like, really? Like, you're you're really farming? Like, that's so crazy. Your great-grandfather would be so proud of you. And I'm like, do tell me more. Like, how would he be proud of me?
They're building a legacy within their community, and it's something that they hope to see, just like the 150-year-old farm sees, that there's something for someone near and far into the future.
But it is an interesting story of how I'm reconnecting back to this industry.
One of the unique things that Illinois Farm Bureau does is to help build up other associations for the industry. This means helping create an organization such as the Illinois Specialty Growers Association. Part of my job is to represent the Illinois Specialty Growers Association that started in 1989, that represents the fruits, vegetables, and flower producers of the state. Alicia got engaged through the Everything Local conference with that association and now represents that board of directors.
I want to thank Raghela for inviting me to be your keynote tonight. I really appreciate the exposure to what we're doing up in Chicago.
I was the keynote for the conference, and then that's when I met a lot more people, and so it's just continued to grow throughout the years.
This is what our farm looked like when we first started. This is the beginning of the project. And this is what it looks like now. So completely transformed that neighborhood.
The work that I've done there is really helping to give the opinion of the urban grower. So I'm like always interjecting in the meeting, like, what about the urban grower, And so because of that, now we have an urban ag seat on the board, which is really exciting. I realized, okay, Alicia, urban ag is just not Chicago proper, right? Although Chicago is the biggest city, there are other metropolitan cities, that exist in Illinois.
One of the biggest things that we have seen our urban growers face is the feeling that they don't know where to turn. They don't know where to connect, be it with other growers, be it with resources and opportunities. And part of what we do is building relationships, connections, and trust. It's knowing where they can turn and being that first stop for them. It's getting them to conferences. If it's connecting them with their FSA office or their USDA agency for a grant loan program.
And I've been really strongly advocating that this can't just be a Chicago project. We might not be able to put a separate office in all the other towns around Illinois, but we surely need to be able to provide services and meaningful programs to all local foods urban producers around Illinois.
As an urban grower, you really don't know what's available to you. You end up setting up your farm very conventionally and not knowing that there are actual programs out there.
My connections have really helped me to pivot. So again, this year, I didn't have a plan for my field. And so I met the guy at the USDA meet and greet, and he gave me a full field of sunflowers.
You know, there's a lot of the challenges that we hear about while we're in Chicago. These are the challenges that they don't think we face downstate. You know, it's not a rural issue, and really it is, because at the end of the day, you know, we're still fighting the food insecurity, we're still fighting infrastructure needs.
I think that folks like me are starting to, you know, make friends and have conversations. And again, we're realizing the things that actually connect us to each other versus you're here, I'm here, we have nothing in common. It's like, actually, we have everything in common.
As agriculture, we can also sit down and have the hard conversations and push our neighbor to be better. Or, you know, I can pick up the phone and say, hey, I know you're starting to sell freezer beef. What's been your biggest challenge? Or, you know, have you tried this feed ration? What'd you think? So, you know, we are all working together in this industry.
I farmed for so long in a silo by myself, and I realized that everybody else is doing the same thing.